So I'm honored, I'm appreciative to be here. I got a quick story about Foster. So I came to one of the Meet the Recruiter events back in May. I think it was this last May. And I was sitting at my table over here doing my all, pregame stuff, whatever, for the Meet the Recruiter event. Foster walks up to me and says, hey, he says, I felt like I need to pray for you. And I'm like, oh, what did I do this time, But I said, well, you know what, Foster? I said, actually, right after this, I said, my wife and I are hitting the road and driving we're headed, my daughter lives in Nashville. We're headed to Nashville for the weekend, her birthday. And so I said, actually, just pray for us on the road. Y'all, I'm not kidding. I've driven to, my wife's mother's in West Tennessee. I've driven that drive from here to West Tennessee 50, 80, 50 times maybe. The worst rainstorm that I've ever driven in on an interstate highway, and if you've driven I-30 to Little Rock, it ain't fun, and there's a lot of construction just west of town. It was white knuckle from about Texarkana to Little Rock, and it was scary. And I told my wife, I said, Foster Williams is praying for us. So I said, just pray too, but Foster's praying for us. And we got there, no problem. So thank you for praying me to Little Rock, Foster. That was... Yeah. So again, I have to keep praying for me because there's other stuff that I need help with too. So anyway, but I am honored to be here. Today is really a big day, as you probably are all aware, because it's my brother's birthday. And so, no, I'm kidding. The election I do encourage you to get out and vote. I did go vote early last week, but I encourage you to get out and vote. It's a big day. The vote matters, regardless of how you feel about that. So, but I do encourage you to vote. I mentioned a couple of things, or a couple of housekeeping things for me real quickly. Next Tuesday morning at the Irving Convention Center is the DFW Technology Prayer Breakfast. Wired Hive is a table sponsor. Our table is full, but if anybody is interested in attending that event, if you'll let me know, we'll connect here in the networking portion. I can try to get you assigned to a table, get you a ticket, that kind of thing. So let me know if you're interested in attending. That starts at 6:30. There's going to be a couple of great speakers, two different men that have started ministries that are reaching some very, very difficult countries or people groups in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, specifically using unique technologies to do it. And so it's going to be a really, really interesting presentation on Tuesday morning. So let me know if you're interested in attending that. We can try to get you fixed up there. Then also, we've been to Meet the Recruiter. That is next Friday. It'll be here in this room. We'll have the Meet the Recruiter event. It's a great networking opportunity again. So I encourage you to make a note. There are, like this group, it crosses all employment. There are a lot of technology candidates and a lot of technology companies like Wired Hive, but there are other companies that do accounting, finance, HR, administrative, all the other things too. So it's just a matter of connecting to the right people when you're here. But there'll be tables of recruiting companies on both sides, and so it's a great opportunity. So I encourage you to attend that. So, mention the landings. I actually I got a call from a candidate that I had worked with. He was a hiring manager for me at a client. And then he's been a candidate for the last few months. He was laid off back in April, and he was here at Meet the Recruiter, I think in the August meeting, maybe September. Anyway, and he called me a couple weeks ago and said he's landed. And so we're starting to see the market pick up. The market has really been slow the last 6 months. I think a couple of things have been impacting that. One of which is the interest rates. Companies weren't sure what the Fed was going to do with interest rates, and it was kind of stifling some economic growth opportunities, in my opinion. And then I think the election today has also been something that companies are kind of waiting to see, okay, what's going to happen? What's the business climate going to be moving forward before they start making some decisions? We just started a couple of new searches last week with a new client that has got a second round of startup funding, and they are looking to begin to add to their team on the technology side. So we're seeing things start to thaw a bit. So I just encourage you, as you're starting your job search, your timing on this is hopefully going to be pretty good, especially coming through. I know typically November, December, especially after Thanksgiving, is a little bit slow, but we'll see it start to pick up after the first of the year. So just a little bit of market intel there. A little bit about Wired Hive. I am with Wired Hive. I started with Wired Hive back in April of this year. Wired Hive specifically focuses on recruiting and staffing in the technology space. We were for years a company, we were called Integra Talent. Michael Chapman is our founder, and he basically ran Integra Talent. It was him and some recruiters and they had some good core business. His brother, Steve Chapman, invested with him a few years ago, and I actually worked with Steve about 15, 20 years ago, and knew him from then, and then he contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in joining Wired Hive after the rebrand, and I did. So I'm thrilled to be here. Great company. We're growing. We're going to be growing with this market, particularly here in Dallas-Fort Worth, but also Houston. We've worked with clients in Chicago and other cities as well. So we'll connect during the networking time. I'll have my LinkedIn pulled up. Let's connect and let's see if we can help anybody that's looking for the job. So that's a little bit about Wired Hive. Let me get here. All right, a little bit about me. So I've been in the staffing business about 20 years, give or take. I got about an 11-year in the middle of staffing where I spent time in home health care. We grew an agency or company from about 6 agencies in home health care up to over 100. And from just in Texas, we grew up to 6 states. And so a lot of that was through acquisition. Our CEO at the time said what she had was her SEC, she called it the SEC, she's a big sports fan. She had the SEC model. She wanted to grow from Texas into Louisiana and Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi. And our first acquisition was in El Paso. Then we made one up in Utah and then Oklahoma, and we never started going east when we were there, so it kind of moved to the Mountain West. But anyway, but it was a great 11 years. I got to do some sales leadership, sales training, that type of thing in that company. And then I got back into staffing as my kids were in college, and it's been a good run. Family's big sports fans. We got the Texas Rangers picture there. That was us there this summer. Yes, Foster.
No, I'm just holding up the Longhorns.
Oh, hooking up the horns. Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, we've kind of got a mixed family. My daughter-in-law's dad actually works for Texas A&M, so we're Aggie fans. My wife is a University of Texas graduate from the pharmacy school, so we're big Texas fans. I met her at Abilene Christian, and all of our kids and our 2 kids and our daughter-in-law all went to Abilene Christian, so we're big Wildcat fans. And then we're also big Stars and Rangers fans. Not so much the Cowboys right now. We're kind of out on Jerry, but maybe they'll win us back. And then also that last picture up there. So I turned 60. I turned 60 in August, and so it just so happened my daughter, I mentioned, lives in Nashville. That was the same weekend Kenny Chesney was in concert in Nashville. And so we went for my birthday. We went to see the Kenny Chesney concert with Zach Brown, Megan Maroney, and Uncle Cracker, and it was a lot of fun. We were wiped out, but it was a heck of a concert. If anybody got to see him here, it's a great show. So anyway, so that's a little bit about me, kind of some background. We're going to talk this morning about winning your job search. And Michael Chapman and I mentioned Michael. We worked on this together, and we really have concentrated on 6 key steps that we think will help you win your job search. We're going to talk about self-assessment. That's important, and not a lot of people pause enough to do that. We're going to talk about researching and targeting what you want to do next, what's next in your career. Tailoring your application materials. This we may go a little further than maybe you have with some other conversations in the past, some other presentations. We're going to talk about interviewing. We'll talk about fine-tuning your online presence. That's big these days. And then networking and expanding your connections, and that's obviously what we're here to do today. So when it comes to the self-assessment piece of it, you're really looking at several things. One is your professional identity. You're looking at who am I? Who am I really? Who do I really want to be? Okay, here's where I am now. Where do I want to be? What's most important in my career development? What training, what certifications will I need to get? Those kind of things. Not a lot of people pause, especially when they get blindsided with a layoff or a furlough or a downsizing, whatever. Their first reaction isn't, okay, let me pause and reflect and think. It's, I got to start the job search, and they immediately rush into it. And then from then, job search is a full-time job, as you know, and so it's really difficult sometimes to make yourself pause and really assess and start thinking about things kind of from that basic level. You know, where do I want to be? Where do I want to go? So we encourage you to look at doing that. What are my strengths? What am I best at? What areas can I improve? What have others said about me that I am good at? What comments have I heard from other people? Or even just ask them, hey, Bob, I worked with you, for 5 years here. What are some things that you saw that was really good at? What are some areas that I could improve? Those types of critiques can really be helpful as you think about what your areas of strength are. And during this time, maybe there's some opportunities for you to take some education, some training, and improve in those areas. I've seen several candidates recently that I've connected with LinkedIn that are getting certifications, that are completing additional online training and things they'll post about on LinkedIn, which I think it's great. I'm always going to comment on that. Kudos for that type of effort to do that. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that. What are your past career successes? I've kind of come up with the term interview toolbox. An interview toolbox to me is stories, it's examples, it's things I can reference in an interview. I can reach in and pull out of my toolbox and say, here's an example of when I did this. Here's an example of when I contributed here and it resulted in this. So think about creating, as you're thinking through your self-evaluation, what is my interview toolbox? What are my great stories that when somebody asks me, I can reach in that toolbox quickly, and I'm not sitting there in an interview dumbfounded. How am I going to answer that question? I've already thought about what that question might be, and I've got something in my toolbox that I can pull out and utilize. I think that's huge, and it's helped me so many times in conversations. And even in a sales role, I've got my sales toolbox, right? There's stories I can pull out of examples of where we've really helped candidates. I'll tell one real quick one. So there's a young man, I'm supposed to have lunch with him next week, a guy that he had moved here from Shreveport, Louisiana, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. Got here in an old beater RX-7, a little, I don't know how the thing was even running, but we got him an interview. He's a tech support guy. Got him an interview, got him a contract role with Globe Life, Torchmark at the time, but Globe Life Company was my client. Got him a contract role. He was the morning he was supposed to start, my phone rings. He says, Troy, it's Tony. Hey, my car won't start. And fortunately, he lived about 2 miles from me. So I said, are you dressed and ready to go? He said, yes. I said, I'll be there. So I went and got him, and I took him to work that day. And I texted the manager. I said, hey, he's going to be a few minutes late. His car wouldn't start. I'm bringing him. He'll be there. Sure enough, he was there. I think he was there about a year, 6 months or a year, something like that. And then we got him another contract with a company that happened to be our managed service provider. So one day, we're his client, we're their client, and they're our client because they've got Tony on a contract role. So Tony comes over to our office to do some work on the computer. He says, hey, I want to show you something. He walked me over to the window, pointed outside to a brand new Dodge Charger. And he wasn't driving that beat up RX-7 anymore. He had that brand new Dodge Charger. And it was a small thing, but it was really kind of a big thing because Tony's still in IT support. He's still doing really well. I've run into him a couple of times at different events, and we've had lunch a few times. And just a great guy. And you know, all I did was kind of help make a connection. I drove him to work one day, and then he took it from there, right? But I love stories like that. That's one that's in my toolbox that I can pull out. You know, I've had people ask me why you do what you do. Well, it's guys like Tony that I was able to help advance his, you know, at least played a small part in helping him advance his career. Well, so what are the next steps in your career? Again, you're doing this self-assessment here, and I've got in here parentheses, think chess moves. A chess player, and I'm not a chess player, I'm better at checkers or tiddlywinks or something like that, but a real chess player is not thinking about this move. They're thinking 2, 3, 4 moves, 5 moves, whatever, down the game. They're thinking further ahead in the game. Football coach is kind of thinking the same thing. They're not thinking about what this play is, but where, you know, how do I get to the right field position or whatever. So think about your career from that perspective. Think about chess moves. Where do I want to be now, or what's my next step? But then what's my next 2, 3, 4 steps down the road? I've got a buddy that he's looking to become a chief technology officer, CIO, CTO, that kind of thing. And he's already planning out his educational experience, things he needs to accomplish, and certifications and whatnot to kind of position himself to be there. I'm not necessarily a strategic thinker like that, so I encourage you to be. Sometimes it's better to coach it than to do it, but that's just not my personality necessarily. But it's, if you're in that kind of a role where you want to get to a leadership position, like a senior level position, it really needs to be strategically thought out. And then be honest with yourself. You know, again, kind of in that time of self-reflection. Where's the best way for me? What's the best way for me to put my skills to use? What type of role? There's I think it's called a Peter principle, right? Where you know, sometimes you advance beyond where your key skills are. You know, there's some coaches in football that really are great defensive coordinators, maybe not great head coaches, but they're super defensive coordinators, and that may be the best role for them. So think about that. So maybe you have a dream to be a CTO, but maybe your best role is a director of infrastructure, and that's where you're with your people, you're making things happen, and that's what really drives you. So think about those types of decisions or thought process too. Sip real quick. Okay. The next step was researching and targeting. In other words, researching the companies, targeting the type of role. When you're researching, you want to look at what is the job title. Now, one thing that's big is the job title doesn't necessarily reflect what the responsibilities are. I once had a job title that was Vice President of Sales. Really, my job function was the VP of Sales Administration, but my title was VP of Sales. So the title didn't really reflect what my job was at that time. So look at that, and as you're looking at career opportunities, consider, not just what the title is. Don't try to just match for the title, but maybe, in some roles, in some companies, a VP level is the equivalent of a manager in a smaller company, and it just kind of is what it is. So be flexible as you look at those type of things. Location, and that's become a bigger thing. So during the obviously pandemic, remote work was a big thing. Everybody wants to work remote. We're seeing more and more companies ask their employees to come in, at least on a hybrid role, 3-2 office remote, 2-3 office remote. I've got my son's working with a new company. They're in the office. I think they're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, remote Monday, Friday. So some companies will have that flex, but it may be more structured than maybe the last place that you were. So consider location. I've worked quite a bit with some clients in Fort Worth recently, and my recruiters at the last company I was with would send candidates that lived in McKinney. Well, yeah, but they said it's only like a 45-minute drive. Well, yeah, it's really about an hour and a half, And so while the recruiters got this great candidate, they want to make a placement, the reality is the manager I'm working with doesn't want to have somebody when they're required to be in the office 3 days a week coming from McKinney. It just doesn't seem practical. So think about location and what is a realistic geography that you would be willing to commute when you're making these applications. What's the company reputation? Lots of ways to find that. There's Glassdoor, there's Indeed, there's a lot of other information sources out there. Obviously be a little careful with that because you're going to see way more negative with most companies than you will positive. People tend to post their negative experiences before they're going to post their positive experiences. So kind of use a filter with that, but obviously you want to research the company's reputation. Is that a company I want to be associated with? What's the reputation? Have a history of a lot of layoffs? That might be a bit of a concern. Are they in a growth phase? Some opportunities for new positions being developed, new career paths. That's a great opportunity, right? So look at the reputation and really look closely at the job requirements. I've seen candidates many times that will send me, hey, I saw you had this job posting and I did that as part of this other role. Well, the role might be really highly a data analytics type of position, but they did some Tableau work at one of their jobs, whatever. That's not a great match, right? So be sure that you really understand the job requirements, and if you apply to something, make sure that you're a pretty darn close fit, and be selective when you do make those types of applications. But the recruiter's job, we can talk more about this later, but the recruiter's job is to make sure that candidates are as close, if you're working with an external agency especially, they're as close to what the client is asking us for as we can possibly be. And obviously to get through the ATS and to get the attention of an internal recruiter, you've got to be a close match for them as well, for them to forward you on the hiring manager. So be sure that you understand the job requirements, and that's really something that you are qualified to do. Look at your professional contacts. Where do they work? Again, we're doing research on companies. Where do your professional contacts work? Do you have any contacts in this company that you're interested in that you could network with? Hey, tell me about the corporate culture at company X. So use that network, use LinkedIn for that. Now, what about your family members, your friends, those types of things? They may have contacts, they may know people as well. Then consider what are your top priorities in your career development. Is it really, do you want to be in a growth company? Do you want to be more of a stable Fortune 500 company, right? What's your personal interest? We touched on location. What's the compensation range need to be? And it's one thing need to be versus want to be, right? We all want to be paid maybe substantially more than we really need, but consider that as well. Are there other? Is this a stepping stone to the next phase of your career? I did this presentation and I left this in for that reason. I did this presentation to some college juniors and seniors, And just a few weeks ago, and my comment to them was, maybe if you're considering grad school or considering law school, but you want to take a couple of years and work, consider that. How would this job contribute to that next step in my career, right? Am I wanting to get an MBA? Am I wanting to get a master's in accounting, that type of thing? So maybe I get some accounting experience if I decide to work in that interim for a year or two. So think about that, and then what education might I need to get along the way, and then really begin to narrow down your targets. Now I know when you're in a job search mode, the mentality tends to be a little bit of a spaghetti at the wall because you want to apply to everything that you think you could be qualified for to maybe get an interview, especially right now, as tight as the market's been. But you really do need to try to be as specific as possible. It's better to apply to fewer things that you're closer fit for, and maybe increase your chances of getting interviews that way than spaghetti at the wall or just scattering seeds. So consider that. Try to narrow down those targets. We talk about resumes a lot. It's best when possible to tailor your resume to a specific job. Again, I know when you're bulk applying, that sometimes can be very tedious. But when I send a candidate, what I will typically do is I'll review the candidate's resumes. I will look at the job description that my client has posted, and sometimes I'll even kind of cut and paste a few of the bullet points from the job description, or maybe even the notes I've taken that are the key things they're looking for. Sometimes job description is one thing, what the client's actually looking for is something else. And so I'll actually copy paste that into my email, and then I'll say, here's where this candidate matches these requirements, and I'll detail that out. That lets me put the candidate in the best possible light to that manager relative to what he's told me they're looking for, he or she has told me that they're looking for. So a good recruiter may do that. Think about that as you're applying directly to how can I best target my resume, my cover letter. We'll talk about cover letters next. My intro email, whatever it is, how can I best target my resume and that to that role. So the question is cover letter. Do we need to have a cover letter? And I can argue either side of that. There's times that it's absolutely important, and there's times, I promise you, it's deleted and not read. But I do think it's good to have one. It's good to prepare one. It's good to have kind of a general one. But again, if you're applying to a specific job, you'll want to customize that cover letter to point out 2 or 3 areas where you matched that job description, so they can see, especially if it's a hiring manager that's actually going to look at this, they're going to see in their mind one of the things that they mentally knows on the job description, and then hear you address that in the very next sentence, that this is how you match that particular requirement. So take that time, make that effort if you're going to do that in an intro email, like I said, or even I think a lot of the online applications give you the ability to write something that's customizable or additional information you want to share or whatever. That's a great place when you're doing those online applications to put that type of information where you match best to the profile, using a cover letter or something similar to that. Online profiles are huge. Your LinkedIn profile is huge. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. I would encourage you to use AI to create. Foster.
I don't know what this thing is. I don't need this thing. You guys, what Troy said is very important. Make a cover letter, because some of the job postings that you guys are seeing right now are requiring a cover letter. They're asking for a cover letter. It helps us recruiters sell you guys to the hiring manager. I don't like that word sell, but if they're asking for one, have one ready. So it's a good practice if you guys build a cover letter right now and have it ready in case somebody asks for one. Okay, I'm gonna shut up.
Good. I love it. No, that's great. I appreciate that. So use AI to create some of this stuff. So I've gotten, I'll be honest, I've gotten to where I'll give ChatGPT a thought. I want to do a LinkedIn post about this and this and this. I want to touch these things. And I ask it to write it, and it writes me a LinkedIn post that is way better expressed than anything I could come up with. Then I tweak it, right? I make it my own. I make it sound like Troy, not ChatGPT. I'll tweak it, massage it, but the message is there. So I strongly encourage you to use AI. I'll give you an example. I had a hiring manager send me the resume of her son, or send me a resume and introduce me to her son via email. And said, hey, he's looking for a job. He's graduating college, looking for a job. And I'm always happy to help. We don't get a lot of entry-level roles, but I'm happy to have those conversations, happy to help. I opened this guy's resume, and he had just graduated, or was just graduated, I think, from Baylor University. And the resume was what he had done in high school. There's nothing about his college experience, any internships, anything. It was just, I don't know if that's just he sent it to the wrong file or what, but it was at his high school. And I thought, well, I can't use this, right? So I went to his LinkedIn profile and I found a pretty good description of what he had done in college. So I copy pasted that. I took the resume, and because this was a hiring manager I've worked with, I was willing to do this. And now I spent maybe 10 minutes on this. It wasn't an extreme investment of my time, but I sit back to him using AI to say, write me a resume of this person. I sent them back a resume and said, hey, I didn't have your college stuff. Wanted to share this. Feel free to use this resume as you apply. And this is the one that I'll save in our system. So if we find something we could help you with. 10 minutes of my time, but able to give them back something that would have taken them, or maybe they paid a professional, would have to pay a professional or spend a lot more time on their own. I was able to put something together. Then they can edit that from there. So I strongly encourage you to use AI to write that cover letter, write those bullet points, responses, even tweak your resume. I've got a friend that's in a job search right now, and he sent me his resume, and I took it and I just ran it through ChatGPT, and I did a little bit of formatting again. I maybe spent 10 minutes on it, and I sent it back to him. I said, I think this format might read a little better. Feel free to use it. Feel free to delete it. It doesn't matter to me. But if I can help in that way, I want to be able to do that. So I encourage you to use AI, maybe more than you have, and maybe in ways that you haven't thought of, using AI to help you build your materials. Keywords are huge. The applicant tracking system I've touched on a couple of times, but you need those keywords, because when your resume is imported to a company's applicant tracking system, they basically pull out those keywords, technologies, different things. And it's really amazing how, and it's even better now with AI, but how effectively they can create a keyword list based on your description of the resume. So include those technologies you've worked with. Don't include something that you've barely touched, because if it's on your resume, it's open game to be questioned. And I've had many candidates that had something on the resume. The hiring manager asks them about it. Oh, well, I used that, in college or whatever. And they really hadn't used it. And so, unfortunately, that disqualified the candidate, because that was a key skill maybe for the hiring manager, but it was something that the candidate really hadn't had experience with. So I encourage you to be selective with the things. Make sure you include the technologies and those buzzwords of things that you have used. Talk about ATS, using ATS-friendly resumes. I've seen some really cool resumes that have, key skills in a column over here, and a box over here, and a box down here. Those types of resumes blow the ATS system's mind. They don't know what to do with those boxes. Okay, so when you submit one that way, it could be to your disadvantage, because you're not getting your best profile built in their applicant tracking system. And most of the times those internal recruiters don't know you and don't have any time to really contact you unless you're a good fit for the role. And your resume structure itself might be getting you disqualified. So I would encourage you, when you're filling out an application, use very simple format, word format. Don't use a lot of text boxes. A common font. I got a resume from a guy last week, and I couldn't open it because the font that he used wasn't readable by Adobe Acrobat for some reason. It didn't recognize the font. And it said, can't open such and such font. And so it took us some back and forth to even be able to open this guy's resume. Again, I'm a recruiter that's trying to place candidates with my clients. It was worth it to me. But if I'm a corporate recruiter, I'm probably just going to show that one to the side and move on to the next candidate, because I've got a pipeline of candidates. So, yes. So if it's in a simple format, the question is, does the ATS really care if it's a PDF format or a Word format? Pardon me. It really doesn't care from that perspective, as long as you don't have those text boxes and funky things going on in there. So I prefer a PDF. I think PDF's a little bit easier to read. But again, the guy last week sent me a PDF that my Acrobat couldn't read. So that's the first time I've had that happen. It may be the only time it ever does happen. And I would say Word docs or PDFs are the best formats to use. I really haven't had much experience with Google Docs and how those work, and I know some people will use that, but I would encourage you to save a Google Doc as a PDF and have your best chance. Okay. And by the way, I'm going to try to leave about 15 minutes here at the end for Q&A. I'm happy to answer as we go, but I'm going to have some time here at the end, and then afterwards we can network and ask other questions too. But I'm happy to answer as we go. Professional email address. So Michael Chapman's personal email address is chapdaddy@gmail. So yeah, don't use chapdaddy as your email address on your professional email address. Come up with something that's a little more professional than that. And you might even have, I've got some candidates I worked with that have a unique email address for their job search, because it's easier for them to keep that all sorted than the other email junk that you get. So I'd encourage you to consider professional email address specifically for your job search process. Phone etiquette, this is big. My wife, I still got to change my key. Every time I read this bullet point, I'm like, I got to do it. My wife's like, your voicemail sounds like you're asleep. You've got to update your voicemail. And I don't think about it because I don't ever call myself, right? Until she says, I left you a message. You still haven't changed that voicemail. I do that, which I just remind myself again, I got to change my voicemail. So update your voicemail. You might even record it standing up. I know if you've ever had any training at all in phone etiquette, phone conversation, you come across happier, more upbeat when you're standing up on a phone call. Sometimes when I'm on a sales call, I'll stand up and kind of walk around and have a conversation, right? So sound upbeat, sound positive, have a good, strong voicemail. Be professional. Hey, you know what to do. Leave a message. This is Troy Dye. Thank you for calling. Please leave a message. I'll call you back as soon as I can. Something like that. Empty your message. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to reach out to a candidate and their voicemail's full, right? Now, again, if it's a strong candidate, I may stay after him, but I promise you, a corporate recruiter, they make a call, your voicemail's full, they're on to the next candidate. So manage your voicemail. Make sure you don't let that get full. Respond to those messages. Answer the call when you can. I know I'm as bad as anybody. If I don't recognize, I had a number last night I didn't recognize, but if I don't recognize the number, I'm probably gonna let it go to voicemail. But if I'm in a job search, I'm gonna be way more apt to answer those phone calls, because it very well could be a recruiter. Sometimes they're calling, the number's gonna show unknown or anonymous because they don't necessarily want you to have their callback number, right? So they may call you from a number like that. So be sure to answer those phones. You can always hang up if it's a sales call or something you don't want to take. But keep that voicemail empty and answer the phone. So preparing for interviews, have one more sip here. Before your interview, be sure you've researched the company. And this is basic one-on-one, but again, some of this is going to be basic one-on-one stuff. Some of it's going to be a little more, maybe something unique. Research the company. Use LinkedIn to research the people you're going to be talking to. If you don't know, ask your recruiting contact, hey, who will I be talking to? If you can get 2 or 3 names, you can at least kind of look at what their backgrounds are. You may have something in common. You may know somebody. It's really great when I hear somebody tell me, hey, you know what, I was on a call and it turns out this guy was on the call too and I worked with him at such and such place, or they had heard about me from such and such. That's always so positive for a recruiter to hear that kind of thing, because obviously I'm going to point that out to the hiring manager. Hey, they connected with so-and-so they used to work with, so hopefully you get some good feedback, right? Something I want to point out on the candidate's behalf. So be sure you spend that time, invest the time up front researching the company, researching those people you'll be interviewing with. Anticipate common interview questions. So I got another story. I'm a big story guy. I told you I got my story toolbox. So my niece graduated from West Texas A&M University last December. And she was getting ready to graduate, sent me a resume. I sent it to a recruiting contact that I knew that happened to have, they had a distribution center in Amarillo, which is where my niece lived and it's where she wanted to stay. And so I said, hey, Jamie, if you guys happen to have anything come open in Amarillo, my niece is graduating. I know it's a long shot. So about 2 weeks later, my niece calls me. She says, Uncle Troy, I've got an interview. It's Benny Keith Corporation, if you guys know Benny Keith. She said, I've got an interview at Benny Keith in Amarillo. I couldn't believe, for a marketing assistant position. Her degree's in marketing. And she said, they just called me. I said, hey, that's great. She said, the interview's, coming up. Can we have time to talk? So we scheduled a virtual call for me to do like a role play interview with her on the evening before the interview. She wanted to prep, make sure she was ready. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me 10 questions that a hiring manager might ask this candidate for this job, right? I said, put their job posting in it. And then ChatGPT gave me 10 questions. So then I got on the phone with Chloe and we started role playing a little bit and she just panicked. She locked up. I'm so nervous. I said, babe, I'm your uncle. This isn't like tomorrow with the real deal. So we talked. I said, tell you what, let's not role play. Let's just talk through the questions. And so we just started talking through the questions and we went through. So anyway, but she relaxed over that time. She got in the interview. She blew it out of the water, did great. So she called me up the next day and she said, at least 4 of those questions that you went over with me last night are questions that the manager almost verbatim asked me. And so she had time to think about that, to prepare for it. So I encourage you to do that, to anticipate those interview questions. Use ChatGPT. Put in the details of the job description, the company. Tell me what questions they might ask me. You're going to get some really good questions. And if it's a 30 to 40% hit on the interview questions they actually ask, that's awesome. But it gives you time to think through that and kind of prepare your toolbox concept before you go in to that interview. Prepare artifacts. So some roles, if you're creative, maybe you've got a portfolio. If you're a project manager, maybe you've got some project documentation that you've used that you could use, or maybe if you change the company name, you could utilize it. Anything like that could be an artifact that you could have available handy during an interview to present, or that you could send prior to an interview, whatever. Prepare those artifacts. Have those business cases, create a portfolio, work product, things that you could present to a potential employer to show them what you can do. Have a portfolio of that available and easy to access. And again, that takes some planning, some preparation up front. Prepare your questions, okay? You're gonna wanna have questions as well. They always ask you, what questions do you have? You wanna obviously have an appropriate number, but find about company culture. And again, your questions are going to be different depending on the person you're talking to. So in an HR interview, I'm encouraging my candidates to ask about culture. What's the company culture? Those types of questions around culture. When you're talking to the hiring manager, the culture questions really aren't necessarily important because you're more concerned about what is the role, what is the job, what are the responsibilities, what are the critical success factors for someone in this role? Is this a new role? Is it a replacement? Where did the person go that was in this role before? Did they promote internally? Did they leave the company? Those types of things. Again, you've got to gauge what's appropriate in the conversation, but having thought through those and prepared a list of questions. And maybe you have 10 questions on your list and maybe you only get 2 or 3 of them, that's great. But at least you showed that you prepared for the interview. The worst thing you could do is say, oh, do they have any questions? That really doesn't show them, A, much interest in the role, and B, that you really prepared to a large degree for that interview. So I encourage you to do that. Dress professionally. It's a good idea to ask the company culture, what the company culture is for the interviews. And then whatever that is, you want to dress maybe one step above that for your interview. So if they're, khakis and polo shirts, maybe you're going to put on a button down and a jacket. Don't need to wear a tie, but maybe, a step above that. If they're Microsoft, one time I went into being a manager at Microsoft, and I just come from downtown. I was meeting hiring manager at Bank of America and drove up 114 to the Microsoft location. And I walked in, I took my jacket off, but I had on my suit pants and a tie and walked in to meet this hiring manager at Microsoft. And he looked at me half joking, but half serious. And he said, don't you ever wear a tie in here again. Because he was in shorts and flip-flops, right? And so he was like, we don't want to mess up a good thing here with people like you walking in ties. And he was teasing me, but also he was serious, like, don't wear a tie in here again. So, but dress professionally, again, a step above what you typically understand that company's dress code to be. Great question to ask if you talk to HR first. Great question to ask them is what would be appropriate for an interview. Ask your recruiter. If you're working with a recruiter and they don't know, they can certainly ask and find out. I've done that many times where I've said, hey, what's appropriate? What is this? Because in some companies, some managers dress up a little bit more than some others, depending on what their responsibilities are within the company. So if it's a C-level, they might be in a jacket and tie, whereas, your infrastructure manager might be in jeans because they're going to go, help move computers today or whatever. So dress professionally and appropriately. Then follow up after the interviews. An email, if you're working with I would encourage you, if you're working with a third-party agency recruiter like Wired Hive, send me an email with that said, hey, would you forward this to the hiring manager and address the hiring manager with a thank you note specifically for them, directed, because the recruiter wants to maintain the control of the relationship. That's your best chance to get the job, is if they're in control of that. So when you start going around the recruiter, that can cause some problems. So work with your recruiter, but say, hey, would you send this to Chad, the hiring manager, and thank him for the interview for me, or send this note and address that to the manager themselves. I love doing that because, hey, I had great feedback from this candidate. They told me they like this and this, and by the way, here's a thank you note that they asked me to forward you. I appreciated your time for the interview. Great way for a recruiter to follow up and give you one extra pat on the back in front of the manager. So follow up is really important. And I'm sorry, John, I didn't look to see what time I started. When do we need to wrap up? About 10:30, perfect. Okay, good time. All right. Online presence. So this is kind of where we're stepping outside of what I think you might have heard normally. Build an online presence. If you have, especially if you're creative, if you have a portfolio, that type of thing, I see it a lot with those types of folks. They'll have, my daughter is this way, she's a copywriter. She has a website with her portfolio stuff in it. I encourage you to build something like that. Even if you're just maybe a project manager, not just, but if you're an IT project manager, build a website that shows some of the things that you've worked on, some things you've accomplished, maybe some of those work product materials that we talked about a minute ago. But maybe an access to your resume is on there. It gives you've now set yourself apart from anybody else applying for the job, most likely, because most of your competitors for a job will not have taken the initiative to do that. So just something to think about doing there. Create your own personal QR code. There are some tools that will allow you to do that. LinkedIn has, I'll show it in a second. LinkedIn, I've recently discovered in the last year, LinkedIn has a QR code as well. By the way, when I network with you later, I'll have that pulled up and we can connect through LinkedIn, and I love to do that. Tidy up your social media. I had a candidate in Tyler, Texas, was wanting to get a break into IT support. And we actually had a job in Tyler, Texas. We talked to this young man. He was really trying to do some things, taking some classes to really get into tech support. This particular company was literally less than a mile from his house, and he was familiar with them. We had the interview scheduled, and the hiring manager called me the morning of and said, hey, we need to cancel the interview. We're not going to move forward with the candidate. And they said, can I ask why? And they said, yeah, we looked at his Facebook profile, which was public, and there were some pictures on there that discouraged us from being interested in him. And so, it was a young man. Again, when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, you're going to post things, right? But if that's a public profile and somebody can go see some of the things you're up to at that younger age, they may or may not be interested in moving forward. So that was very disappointing. Really disappointing for him because he wasn't that kid anymore, right? But some of the things that they saw, his activities at the time weren't the things that they wanted to have be involved with. So tidy up social media, make things private. Be careful what you post. You want to be a positive presence on social media. If a manager sees that somebody is very negative on LinkedIn, they may or may not be interested in interviewing them, right? That this may not be the personality. If they're a complainer, does this person really fit in our company culture? So consider things like that as well. So I mentioned LinkedIn has a QR code. I just pulled this up. I don't know how well you can see that. But if you just pull up your main LinkedIn page, and up in that upper right, hit the second slide there, you've got that funky little kind of square grid thing. That's your QR code tab. Click that and it pulls up your personal LinkedIn QR code. Super easy to connect. Again, you guys may all be using that. I've only found out about it in the last year, so I started using it and not using business cards quite as much. So encourage you to make sure you know how to utilize that. But you can build a personal QR code that goes to that website page, that web page, if you decided to develop that. We touched on LinkedIn, so you want to update your profile. Make sure that your current job, if you've ended that job, go ahead and put an end date on it. Because I've had candidates and clients, I've had clients decline interviews with candidates because they'll look at a resume and the dates don't match what's on LinkedIn. And sometimes there's significant differences, which I don't know why people would do that. But sometimes I've had hiring managers cancel interviews because the dates of one employment period or one employer's time frame didn't match from the resume what was on LinkedIn, so they didn't feel like that person was honest. Maybe over judging that, but again, something to consider. So be sure that your resume is accurate and that your LinkedIn profile matches your resume. Update your picture. Use something pretty current. I had a manager was asking us to put on our Outlook profile. She wanted us to have our picture on the Outlook profile with our signature line. So and we had to send it to her for approval. So I put Brad Pitt's picture on that and sent that to her for approval. She got a good laugh out of it, but she said, "No, I want your picture." So anyway, you have fun with it. But yeah, use a current picture. Yeah, and then follow companies. So if you're applying to a company, follow them on LinkedIn. You're going to learn more about the corporate culture that way. If the manager is reviewing your LinkedIn profile and they see that you're already following the company, that's going to be to your benefit, right? It's a little thing, but sometimes little things is what makes a difference in getting interviews, not getting interviews, and it's usually little things that make a difference between getting a job and not getting a job. So follow those companies you apply to. Try to comment, be active on social media, be active on LinkedIn. Comment a couple of times a week or more. Post once or twice a week if you see something interesting. Again, I use ChatGPT to help me write some of my posts because I can make them more engaging for the audience that way. And then ask for recommendations. If you've looked at the bottom of, you have recommendations. If you don't have any recent recommendations, I've had managers comment, well, they didn't have any recent recommendations. It's been 3 or 4 years since anybody's commented or recommended on their LinkedIn profile. It's not something that we actively do a lot of times, but I encourage you to either ask for recommendations or go make a recommendation on somebody that you've worked with that you would like a recommendation from. Go make a recommendation because they'll get a notification that you've made the recommendation, and very frequently they will respond and recommend you as well. Or make a recommendation of them that's current, updated, and say, hey, would you do me a favor? I'm on the job market. Would you make a recommendation for me? So that's a great two-way street. I've been asked one of these presentations about whether to use the open to work tag on LinkedIn. I think that's a super interesting question. And my answer is I really don't know. I think there's some very positive things to it. I have had people tell me, I'm afraid it makes me look desperate. I've never had a manager tell me, give me a negative feedback that somebody had open to work on their resume. I did see somebody recently post, they've been out of work for a while, and they said, I wish there was a desperate to work tag. Now that's probably a step too far. But again, that goes to if a hiring manager sees that, what's the response going to be when they see that candidate that now they're suddenly desperate to work? That may or may not be somebody. And I understand mentally we sometimes get there, but is that what we really want to say to our prospective employers at large? So be careful with things like that. But I would say open to work, I think it's a great way to be noticed. It's a great way to show recruiters that you're on the market, that you're looking available. It's a great way to show your network that you're on the market. Because again, all of us have been out of a job one point or another, either coming into the workplace for the first time or being laid off and transitioned. So any way that we can let others in our network know that we're looking, it's a little thing, but it could help. So I'd encourage you to do it, but it is something I've been asked, and I thought I'd mention that at that point. Reach out to your personal connections. I know that's pretty obvious. Send direct messages to at least 50% of your network individually. And I've got some post-it note things on my desktop screen that are some kind of standard greetings that I'll send to people. Hey, I noticed we're connected. We share connections, several connections on LinkedIn, and we're both in the technology sector, DFW, hoping to connect. I've got one of those as a post-it on my laptop screen, and I'll copy paste that into a message. So it takes me, 30 seconds to send a message to somebody. I've got probably a dozen of those different greetings that if I want to send a quick LinkedIn message, I can do that. Saves me some time. I'll customize it, make sure their name's in there, customize something specific to them, maybe our relationship, and send that. So I'd encourage you to think about things like that as well. When applying to a job, try to connect to somebody from that company, maybe the hiring manager, maybe somebody in HR, maybe somebody that works in the same department, maybe it's the project management group, and you know somebody in the PMO, or you're connected to somebody that's connected in that PMO, that type of thing. It's okay, and I use these CIO, CTO because I'm in technology, but it's okay to reach out and try to connect with the CEO of the company, for crying out loud. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, I know people are nervous. I don't want to look desperate or whatever. You know, they may not accept your LinkedIn. Well, you weren't connected with them before, so that's not a problem. But maybe you connect with the CIO. Maybe you know somebody that knows the CIO that could help make an introduction for you, that type of thing. So it's okay to reach higher than you might normally be comfortable with on LinkedIn. I always try to put the shoe on the other foot. If somebody asks me a question, if somebody asks me to give a recommendation on LinkedIn, would that bother me? No, I'd be honored if somebody thought enough of me that they think my input. I just don't think to do it, but if you ask me to, I would absolutely give a recommendation, right? So I think that's important to kind of keep in mind. Would it kind of spin it around? Would it bother me if so-and-so asked me for a recommendation? All right, reach out to current network. Try to add 20 new contacts a week. Again, you can say, hey, we're connected, we share mutual connections, or I see you're at company X, I'm interested in potential employment opportunities there, would you be willing to connect? Again, people are not going to be offended by that, and they're going to be happy to, 9 times out of 10, they're happy to make those connections. Join online. There's a lot of online LinkedIn groups. I'm not great about this one myself. There are a lot of online LinkedIn groups. And then help someone else with their job search. Kind of pay it forward. That stuff always comes back to you, but pay it forward, reach out, try to help someone else, make a connection. I had a candidate that we had placed about 10 years ago at a company in Fort Worth, and I met her for coffee. She'd gotten laid off, and I met her for coffee, and we were talking, and we talked about her background. Well, she messaged me a few weeks ago and said, hey, I've applied to a job at Citibank. You know anybody at Citi? I said, yeah, I do, actually. So I made 4 introductions for her at Citi through LinkedIn. 2 of them responded. One of them helped her follow up on a specific role that she was interested in interviewing for, and made an introduction on LinkedIn that way. So again, I just made a couple introductions, let it go from there, but they were responsive and helped her kind of get connected to the person that she could potentially be interviewing with. So you just never know where those things are going to lead and how they're going to work out. Oops, sorry, I think I went the wrong way. Again, networking. This is my last slide, so we're pretty much on time. Attend networking events like this. Frisco Connect's great. Meetups. There's a company in Plano called Improving. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Improving, but almost every night of the week, at least 3 to 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday, they have different groups that use their meeting space for meetups, different ones, Dallas UX. I'm just trying to think of some of the other ones that I've been up there. There was a Scrum group that met last week. There's a Java group, I think, that meets up there. There's a mobile developers group that meets up there. And so I'm trying to get up there a night or 2 a week to actually go to those, shake some hands, meet some people. But those are all on Meetup. So do some looking on Meetup to find those opportunities as well. PMI, if you're in project management, I met a young lady a little bit earlier, just moved here to the U.S. She's got a project management background. She's not a PMP, not a certified project management professional, but I said, get plugged into the Dallas PMI, start going to those meetings, start networking through Dallas PMI. We've actually done this presentation virtually to the Fort Worth PMI chapter a few months back, and then after that we did it to the Dallas PMI chapter on a virtual lunch and learn. And so they're great organizations, super easy to plug into and make connections. Things like HR Southwest, if you're in the HR world, Society of HR Professionals, SHRP, that's what it is. HR Southwest is their annual North Texas meeting, I mentioned that. Different business events, anyway. Tap in your network to get yourself on the radar. Don't be afraid to say you're looking for a job. Again, we've all been there. Let's try to help each other, and people are always happy. I think deep in our souls, every person in this room wants to help somebody else, right? And so just ask, hey, can you help me with that intro to Citibank? 100%, absolutely happy to do that. Some of this is pretty self-explanatory. Industry events, job fairs, career expos, and then reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. Again, if it's just making an intro, I mentioned the young lady that we introduced for Citibank. One of my son's friends, my son's now a CPA, but one of his buddies from college had reached out to me and he's kind of runs an Apple platform for a large bank. He said, hey, I'm applying to this bank. Do you know anybody? Absolutely. I made an intro there, and this guy helped him get an interview through that little connection. All I did was made that simple connection. But I always encourage you, use that network, and I'm always happy to help however I can.